What is up, YouTube and Facebook fam? This lesson is all about getting even more use out of the simple fills that you might already know. Just be careful because these fills might get you fired from the gig. Displacing rhythms is actually a very easy topic to understand, and the best way to explain it is to show you through notation. In this example, we have a quarter note on the downbeat of 1, then we rest for the rest of the measure. So if I were to play this, it would literally be 1, 2, 3, 4. Just a clap on 1. Now let's say I want to displace this by 1 quarter note. I want to move it back 1 quarter note. Instead of that clap being on 1, the clap is now going to be on 2. Here's the displaced rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's displace that rhythm again, except this time by an 8th note. So instead of that quarter note being on beat 2, it's now going to be on the and of 2. Here's the new rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Those are 2 basic examples of displacement. So now let's get into some fills and start displacing those. Let's start by displacing a fill that most people have heard in some kind of music. Some people call this the Pat Boone, Debbie Boone fill. Here's a notation for it, and this is what it sounds like. That's the unaltered fill. That first quarter note on the downbeat of 1 is played on the snare, the second quarter note on beat 2 played on the high tom, the 2 8th notes, which would be 3 and the and of 3, you play in the snare again, and then that quarter note on beat 4, you play in the high tom. Now, let's displace this by 1 8th note. So everything you play, you're just displacing it or moving it back by 1 8th note. So that snare drum that was originally on the downbeat of 1, you're going to play on the and of 1 this time. The high tom on beat 2 is now on the and of 2. The 2 snare drum hits that we had on 3 and the and of 3 now go on the and of 3 and then beat 4. And that leaves that final high tom hit which goes on the and of 4 instead of beat 4. I displaced that Pat Boone, Debbie Boone fill by 1 8th note. I made it 1 8th note later. So now let's take a different fill and displace it by 1 16th note instead of 1 8th note. This is what the original fill is going to look like, so no displacement yet. So we have 4 16th notes, 1 E and A on the snare drum, 4 16th notes, 2 E and A on the high tom, back to the snare drum for 3 E and A, and then 4 E and A we're going to play on the floor tom. Now for all of these, we're going to accent the downbeat. So accenting 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's what it's going to sound like. Like I said, I want to displace this fill by 1 16th note. So instead of starting on beat 1, we're going to start on the E of 1. Here's the notation for that new fill. Notice how all the accents shifted from the downbeats, 1, 2, 3, 4, to the E of every beat. So you're accenting the E of 1, E of 2, E of 3, and then the E of 4. Here's what it's going to sound like. I'll play the hi-hat on beats 1, 2, 3, 4, that way you can hear where the pulse is. This last fill is going to be triplet based, and it actually serves as an example of where displacement helps the original fill to sound better, in this case in the jazz style. So now, instead of displacing this fill later, like we did in the previous examples, we're going to displace this backwards. So beat 1 is now going to be played on the let of 4. I hope this lesson has been helpful for you, and I'm super looking forward to what you have to do with displacement. So please tag me in any videos you post on Instagram or Facebook. I would love to see it. Thank you so much. Stay inspired.